Two identical oak trees hit the ground on the same day. One is inside a chipper within an hour. The other becomes a bear sculpture standing on somebody's porch 30 years later. Between those two fates is a chain of machines, choices, and one tool that can either destroy or create. Watch to the end. The final tool is a knife. A wood chipper with 850 horsepower can swallow a 30-inch diameter oak trunk and turn it into a heap of chips in about 12 seconds. That is the moment most people think a tree is done. The moment the sound stops. Oak, chestnut, and acacia stems get fed in one after the other. The crane arm picks up whole logs and drops them into the intake. Wood that took 80 years to grow becomes fuel for a hotel heating system in less time than it takes to check your email. Same tree, but a very different fate is possible. Now watch the exact opposite happen, with the same species of wood and the exact same tool, a chainsaw. A carver in Canada puts on ear protection, walks up to a fresh log of similar size, and starts cutting. Same wooden saw, completely different destination. Over the next few hours, that log stops being a log. Large sections come off first to define the head, shoulders, and back. Then finer cuts shape the muzzle, ears, and paws. An axe steps in for detail work the chainsaw cannot reach. What comes out is a wooden bear that will sit in somebody's front yard for the next 20 or 30 years. Two identical trees. One becomes wood chips in under a minute. The other becomes a sculpture that outlives the person who cuts it. How does that even happen? The answer starts long before anybody picks up a chainsaw. It starts the moment somebody has to figure out how to get the tree out of the forest. A cable skidder from decades ago still shows up on private woodlots today. Because sometimes the old design just works better. A logger drops a tree with a chainsaw, wraps a steel cable around the butt end, and the skidder pulls the log out along a muddy path. Chain tires bite into the mud, and the whole rig crosses streams that no truck would ever try. On thinning jobs, where the plantation owner wants live trees left between the rows, a full-size harvester is the wrong tool. The mini combo machine takes over. A compact, articulated harvester fells and delimbs while a matching forwarder trails behind, hauling logs out on the same trip. One operator, one tight footprint. No skid trails a foot deep. Some woodlots are so tight that even a mini combo cannot get through. And this is where the true, small footprint forwarders show what they can do. A mini forwarder about the size of an ATV navigates uneven ground, threads between standing trees, and even crosses shallow streams using metal ramps laid down by the operator. Ground pressure is the number that decides whether a machine leaves a forest healthy or ruined. Too heavy on soft soil and the wheel ruts turn into permanent drainage channels that kill tree roots for years. A machine this small spreads its load across 4 small tires, and even a full load of logs barely dents the moss on the forest floor. Would you spend triple the hourly rate on a machine this small to keep a woodlot healthy, or push a bigger machine through and accept the damage? Say how you would make that call. Same job, completely different approach. And then there are the private landowners who do the whole job themselves with a farm tractor and a log trailer. Because the price of a purpose-built forwarder is not in the budget. A mid-size utility tractor with a front loader up front and a hydraulic log crane on the trailer behind can pull decent loads out of a forest, right up until the ground gets soft. Watching a farm tractor spin its rear tires down into 2 feet of Scandinavian spring mud is what makes you appreciate what a real forwarder is designed to handle. The tractor leans. The trailer sinks. The operator gets out to check whether the whole rig is about to tip over. At the end of the day, the logs still make it to the roadside pile. Slower, riskier, more painful. But it works. No matter how many tons of oak sit on that trailer, none of it turns into a plank until it reaches the mill. Here is the part almost nobody realizes. Plenty of harvested trees pulled out of a forest never become lumber. They become wood chips. A horizontal grinder with a 42 by 63 inch cutter mill and a mill opening 60 inches wide swallows entire trees at a time, spits chips onto a conveyor belt, and fills a trailer in minutes. Oh, A whole tree, an entire hour of chainsaw work at the stump, and it disappears into a chip trailer in under 60 seconds. And when the material is greener and messier, leaves, small branches, brush, a different kind of shredder takes over. A front-end loader dumps bucket loads of green waste into an industrial chipper. The internal cutter processes it in one pass, and the output rides a conveyor to a pile. Sawing pays more per ton, but only for stems clean enough to make grade. Bent stems, small diameters, brush, tops, all become biomass fuel, pulp feed, or landscape mulch. And once in a while, a stem that would have been chipped ends up somewhere different, because somebody picked up a chainsaw and saw a sculpture inside it. The chainsaw does not know whether it is cutting firewood or shaping a sculpture. The person holding it does, and that is where the whole shift starts. A simple log holder with a lever-action clamp holds the log in place while the operator cross-cuts it into firewood-length rounds. Zero electronics, zero horsepower over what the chainsaw already brings. Just leverage, geometry, and a folding steel frame that assembles in under a minute. The clamp holds the log tighter every time you push down on the saw, so the wood cannot roll or shift mid-cut. That is the whole idea behind wood handling. Get the material stable, and the operator can spend their attention on where the cut is going instead of whether the log is about to squirm out from under them. Same principle applies whether the goal is a stack of firewood or a 2-meter sculpture. Watch a chainsaw carver rough out a Moai statue from a fresh log, and you will understand something the industry does not talk about much. Carving is subtractive design at high speed. The carver starts with a plain vertical log, then makes a series of large cuts to define the head, shoulders, and base. Every cut is a decision that cannot be undone. Take too much off one side of the face and the whole sculpture leans wrong. And there is no way to add wood back. The chainsaw does the rough work. A rotary tool then takes over for the finer details. Eyes, nose, mouth, brow line. Same chainsaw that dropped the tree in the first place, but now it is shaving off millimeters at a time instead of taking chunks. How many hours of practice do you think it takes before somebody can walk up to a raw log and see the finished sculpture inside it? Give your honest guess. Step up a level, and the same tools produce something that most people would assume required a full sculpture studio. A human figure inspired by Maori teko carvings starts with the bark stripped by chisel, then chainsaw cuts to establish the rough form. An angle grinder shapes the surfaces. Chisels and mallets add the intricate facial patterns and body carvings. The final piece gets sanded by both hand and power sander, stained a deep reddish brown, sealed clear, and finished with abalone shell inlaid into the eyes. Every one of those steps used to require a completely different workshop. The chainsaw crew in one shed, the fine carvers in another, the finishing team in a third. Now the whole progression happens under one roof, often for one client, on a piece that ends up in a private garden or a specialty gallery, priced at whatever the buyer will pay. The Tiki pole is where the whole same chainsaw, different result idea reaches its peak, because the carver has to plan out an entire vertical composition before making the first cut. The pole starts as a plain wooden column. A design gets sketched onto paper, then transferred to the pole using tracing paper, then redrawn directly onto the wood in pencil. Only then does the chisel come out. Small cuts define the outer boundaries of each figure stacked on the pole. Bigger cuts pull away the negative space. The chainsaw does the deep valleys between figures, then goes back into the toolbox, because from that point on, the whole job runs on hand tools. Different chisels for different curves, straight gouges for long grooves, bent gouges for concave surfaces, V-tools for sharp lines between features. Every one of them removes just enough wood to keep the story readable up and down the pole. 60+ tools spread across the workbench, and every one of them exists because somebody, at some point, needed a shape a chainsaw could not produce. Once the carving is done, a dark stain gets brushed on. The pole ships out, still smelling like fresh wood. And at the small end of the same craft, hand carving produces something you can hold in one hand. A cocktail muddler with a tiki face carved into the head. No chainsaw here at all, just a rough wooden cylinder, a pencil sketch wrapped in paper, and a handful of small chisels and gouges. The carver works section by section, revealing the tiki face one detail at a time. Sanding, brass fittings, and a coat of finish. And the muddler goes home in a bar kit for a bartender who wanted something no factory would ever make. Here is where the video really flips your idea of what a chainsaw is for. Because at this level, the tool disappears and the eye takes over. A Texas carver walks up to a mounted log, and within minutes the shape of a turtle starts to emerge. Shell first, then head, then flippers. The chainsaw operator does not think of the machine as a saw anymore. It is a chisel that removes half a pound of wood per swing. Every cut is placed exactly where the turtle wants to appear inside the log. Not every carver plows straight in with a chainsaw. Some start with an axe. A carver working on an eagle sculpture starts by shaping the log with hand axe blows before the chainsaw ever comes on. The axe defines the general form. The chainsaw takes over for the deeper cuts, wings, head, tail feathers. Then a smaller chainsaw comes out for the finer feather work. A 12-inch bar can do things a 24-inch bar physically cannot. And every serious carver has 3 or 4 saws lined up like a set of paintbrushes at different sizes. Whoa. The wood beneath the surface layer is already the eagle. The only job is finding it and letting the rest fall away. After the sculpture is roughed out, a blowtorch chars specific parts of the wood for contrast and depth. Black paint goes on the body, white on the head, yellow on the beak and talons. Total working time drops from 8 hours in real life to 13 minutes in the time-lapse. Watching it condensed makes every decision look inevitable, which is exactly the trick. When the reference animal has a distinctive shell pattern, the chainsaw work has to leave room for hand detailing after. A Galapagos tortoise sculpture takes shape with primary cuts for the domed shell. Then a rotary tool adds the shell segmentation and skin texture. Same tool, higher resolution version of itself. Rabbits are where every chainsaw carver learns why animals are harder than they look. The whole shape depends on the ears. Long, thin, standing upright, made of the same wood that 10 seconds earlier was part of a solid log. The carver cuts a log in half first to get 2 rabbit blanks. The chainsaw defines the head, body, and paws. The ears get roughed out but not finished by chainsaw. The wood is too thin at that point, and one wrong cut takes the whole ear off. Nobody glues an ear back on a wood carving. A rotary tool takes over for the fur texture, the eye sockets, and the fine detail around the nose and whiskers. Small bits at high speed produce the wood fiber pattern that reads as fur under paint. 60 different rotary bits laid out on a workbench, and each one exists because a specific detail needed a specific shape of cut. At the end, a wood stain goes on both rabbits. One sits inside on a shelf, one goes outside on a garden bench. Same log split into 2 nearly identical sculptures. But the wood grain runs differently through each one, so no 2 rabbits ever look alike. Chickens sound easy until you actually try to carve one. The comb, the beak, and the tail feathers all point different directions from the same block. The chainsaw defines body, head, and tail first. Then a smaller saw refines the comb and beak. A rotary tool handles the feather texture. Sealed, finished, ready to sell before the end of the day. And back to where the video started, with a bear carving. This time from a carver who is walking through the whole process, not just showing the result. A $40 log becomes a finished bear sculpture. The math on that is what makes carving so appealing to anyone with a chainsaw and free weekends. Marking comes first. The carver draws the head, ears, and paws directly onto the wood. The chainsaw roughs out the basic shape. Big cuts to establish the head, shoulders, back, and paws. A grinder then refines the shapes and adds texture, especially around the face where the chainsaw is too aggressive to work. A rotary tool carves the fine details, eye sockets, mouth line, fur pattern. The face gets sanded smooth so the eyes can be positioned precisely, because a bear with slightly off-center eyes reads as wrong, even to viewers who cannot say why. The finished carving will sell for several $100s. A $40 log, 6 or 7 hours of work, and knowledge that takes years to build. And somebody's front porch just got a new resident. Every log has a shape hiding inside it. The carver's job is to remove everything that is not that shape. After all the machines, all the chainsaws, all the sawdust, here is where the whole video slows down to a single knife and a piece of wood. A carver in blue gloves opens a wooden box, pulls out a finished carving knife with an engraved blade, and starts shaping a small block of wood into a trout. No chainsaw, grinder, and power tools of any kind. Just a sharp blade, steady hands, and 4 to 5 hours of continuous cutting to turn one block into one fish. Every shaving falls onto the workbench in a spiral. The blade removes maybe 1/10 of a gram of wood per pass. Fins take shape. Eyes get carved. The mouth opens. Scale details emerge one at a time. Same wood we followed at the start of the video. Same species that got fed into an 850 horsepower chipper in the first minute. Different destination completely. The trout gets sanded smooth. The camera lingers on the finished piece. A tree that grew for decades was cut in seconds, and now lives on as a wooden fish that will sit on somebody's shelf for the rest of their life. Same tree, so many futures. And every one of them starts with somebody deciding what to make of it. Every year, enormous volumes of timber are harvested around the world, and only part of it becomes lumber or finished wood products. The rest is turned into wood chips, pulp, biomass, and other industrial materials, while some harvesting residues are left in the forest to decompose. The interesting argument right now is not whether we cut too much. It is what we do with what we cut. Mass timber construction wants premium sawlogs for engineered beams. Biomass energy wants low-grade wood at scale. Furniture buyers want the tightest grain in the pile. All three markets pull from the same forests, and prices swing hard depending on who is winning that month. So which side actually gets more of the tree 10 years from now? Construction, energy, or craft? Say where you would place the bet in the replies. Thanks for hanging with the whole ride. If a tree becoming 100 different things pulled you in, tap subscribe. More layered industrial stories ahead.